Samsung community, community.
And I think can everyone hear me? It's gonna echo a bit. Oh no, perfect. Okay, I just wanted to briefly understand who is my audience right now. So postdocs raise their hands, grad students, great. Um, and people who are considering, are interested in the academic job market, raise their hands. People who are not that encouraged and still flirting with industry and other options, raise their hands. Okay, and then last question, who would be able to understand Lord of the Ring references because they either watched or read the franchise, raise their hands. Okay, wonderful. So the reason why I call these the academic job market a very short introduction, it's because the entire process is really long and very overwhelming. So what I was trying to do with this Skillshare is to basically provide a helicopter view of what you guys would be going for if you decide to apply. And one of the things that really that are really wholesome and I really love reading is this Oxford University Press very short introduction. So they offer really amazing, concise, and original introductions to a wide range of subjects. And in the style of these kind of small books, I'm just gonna try to do my best to offer and share everything I know about the academic job market. I do have some disclaimers to do, of course. So this is just my experience for a tenure track job in biology at R1 institutions. So the sample size is me. I submitted 15 applications only. There are people who submit 50 to 60 to 100 applications. So out of my 15 submissions, I got 4.5 interviews. I tell you why one is considered a half, and I got 2 job offers. There's a lot of imposter syndrome and survival bias and guilt involved at this moment. I'm still handling that, and this is probably something everyone has faced, is facing, and will continue to face one way and another, just because academia and science are currently under attack at many levels. And so I just wanted to disclaim that. I also want to say that I was very lucky. I applied once to the 2024-2025 job cycle. And this was before, so I've never been part of a search committee. So I cannot objectively say what a search committee looks like, how decisions are made. I do have a feeling and an intuition for it based on what people who've been in search committees share with me. And so I'll try to share with you that to the best of my abilities. I also will start with acknowledgements or massive acknowledgements. So I received essential feedback and support from really wonderful people that include some of my housemates and friends and colleagues that I had at Berkeley who had already started this journey and were trailblazers for me and gave me a lot of feedback and input in my materials. And I really had 3 to 4 dependable mentors that were submitting my recommendation letters on my behalf. I also had massive support above and beyond the average standards from my postdoctoral advisor, Peter Sudman, and his entire lab. They were there for every single step and were very patient and gracious with me, because I will tell you, this will become your job when you start doing that. It's like undertaking a massive scientific project where the project is you and your entire life. So I also want to be a little bit straightforward on the application timeline. So I started writing my materials at the end Why isn't okay, I started writing my materials by July, August, and I was kind of testing the waters and looking at advertisements that sort of started coming in October. Some of them were as early as September, and the deadlines are all around November, December. I think the latest I had was November 29th. Then interviews started around January and March. And then by March, May, you will get, hopefully, offer. This process is really long, as you can see from the timeline, and I question myself the whole time. So when you start going to the to apply, I think that this is not just submitting materials. If you get called to interviews, there will be a lot of next steps, and it is a marathon, not a sprint. So if I always say that if we were all gonna run the San Francisco Marathon, we probably wouldn't wake up one day in bed and say, yeah, okay, let's do it. I mean, there would be some preparation involved. You would start by walking, then running, then going, make sure that you are in great physical shape to do it. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into running a marathon. So I always try to say that there's not just the application, there's a pre-application step. So I'm actually even not sharing here step 0, timeline 0, but and so here's where the Lord of the Rings metaphor comes in. So I basically compared my application process as the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King. And if you're curious, I'll be able to share a little bit more why I see it like that. So the pre-application stage is where some of you probably are right now. If there's anyone that's already applying, do let me know and I can discuss more. But I'm assuming that at this point, no one has objectively started to apply for any position. So there's this stage where you are like, will I and why? And that are very profound and deep questions because it's what you're starting to decide that your life is going to be. I think for the longest time, some of us just drift as following our dreams, but also from an educational mindset where we're okay, we go to undergrads, then we do a PhD or a master's, and then we do a postdocs, and then what? And I think that is where you have this vertigo where suddenly feels like you're making really life-changing and drastic decisions that are pretty consequential. And so that can be a bit scary. There's also the question when. And for many people, when is now, and for others, when is in 2 to 3 years. And there are many things that you need to ask yourself to make sure that when you do it, you are not wasting your time and you're not setting yourself for failure. Where, well, it's always a complication thing because where we are is it's not just about geography, it's also about context. We are where we are because we have friends, we have our support group here, we are in a place that we feel seen, we feel safe. So moving is a really hard choice and it's never clear where we're gonna go. And then the how. And at some point, this is when the plant dies, where I mean, like people are so overwhelmed and they just start feeling that it's just so much and that they don't know. And so this is my pre-application list that I think that are questions to have done before deciding to apply. So first of all, have you talked with your advisor about it? I think talking with your advisor is really key because he will tell you, as or she or they will be able to understand if is a good point for you. Now, I'm thinking about this from a perspective that your advisor is a great advisor that has your best interests at heart. That's not always the case. So I don't want to assume that they are the best person to go to, but they are an important person that you need. Because let's say that you are doing a postdoc and you just started your postdoc. there's an expectation from your advisor that you're going to be doing some postdoctoral work with them until the right time, which is a time where you have served your role as a postdoc to the advisor, but on the other hand, they also have a duty to you to invest in your professional development. And that is a conversation that with kind and open communication you should face. So you should not just start applying on the back of your advisor, if that makes sense. Like there should be some gentleman's agreement in this case that it is a good time, and also more importantly, I think that they can be really good allies in this case, because they will know if you are quote unquote competitive enough, whatever that means, because that's also a great topic for discussion if you're interested. You also need to talk with those that can be for you. So do you have friends and allies that you look up to, that you relate to, that you identify with, that have been able to go through this? And what were the positives that they took from this experience? What were the negatives, and what did they find crucial? So here today, I hope to be that friend and ally. Have you invested enough in your professional development? So this is going more into the objective, concrete steps. So it is really important that when you're applying, your research, you have enough research outputs, that you have invested in conferences where you shared your research and your research program. And it's also important that you have cultivated some sort of online presence. And here I'm not saying, oh, you need to be necessarily into social media, but do you have a website that kind of sums up different parts, the sum of the parts that make you who you are? And that can be like blog posts if you have them. There can be science communication if you have them. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives are actionable things that you've done if you have them, and so on and so forth. And I hate this word branding, but one thing that I discovered is that the job search has been, for the most part, a branding exercise. It's not so much about showing results and discussing questions and hypotheses. It is, and that is critical, but it's also a lot about who you are, where you're going, and why the university should hire, what kind of package do you represent that they surely need, and that you would be bringing value to them. So another important thing is that you have to prepare your recommenders before you submit anything, because obviously you're going to be applying to a lot of places and you're casting a wider net, and your recommenders are going to be submitting a lot of letters of recommendation in your behalf. And the portals and the systems are not straightforward. Some of them, they have to submit it for you after you apply. Sometimes they have to submit it for you 3 weeks or 2 weeks before the deadline of the application process. Sometimes they don't even have to submit. You just put their emails, and should you become at a short list, they will reach out to them later. So the way recommendation letters comes in many shapes and sizes. And last but not, then another thing is, have you done your spreadsheet and shared it? So a spreadsheet would basically be a timeline of all the universities that you are applying. Ideally, you would put these as covet pins. I made these, the yeses, the nos, and the maybes. And I'm gonna, if you are interested in understanding what those are, I'm also happy to discuss that. And obviously have the deadline, and the recommenders for each of those, and the materials that you would need for each of those, because they will vary, and I will also go into that. And also, you need to know yourself. Are you prone to self-sabotaging or procrastinating when it comes to writing your materials? So for example, for me, self-sabotaging is, I don't write big picture too small. I get stuck into paragraphs and I stay 5 hours to write a paragraph. That is not an effective time management skill. Ideally, you would write something imperfect and would slowly perfect it with time, but I just get stuck into micro editing and getting the first perfect paragraph. And that has been a self-sabotage in terms of time management skills, or procrastinating, which is like you just start doing other things to avoid doing that, and then it fits way too later. So know yourself in that regard and how that would affect your timeline, so you can write a bit beforehand or laterhand. Maybe you are amazingly good writing under pressure. So this is something that at this point, being PhDs and postdocs, we're comfortable, quote unquote, with deadlines. So we know ourselves enough to understand what we can do in how much time. And then if you start having those things, then things will start looking a little bit brighter, because you will have established a plan, and then you see, okay, it's impossible until it's done. So I can and I will. So why? Well, why? Because you are worthy. And if this is your dream, you are absolutely empowered to do so. When? Well, you would have talked with people, and that will have given you a sense of when to do it. Where? Well, it can be different priorities. For me, the where was to have a place where I could fly home. So I'm Portuguese, and I wanted to be able to move to an area where I could fly to see my family easily, and not have like a 32 hours flight each time I want to go see them. So a direct connection to the city where my family is and the country where my family is and my partner was key. Where? Well, I knew I wanted to live in a place where there's body of water around. So I grew up in a fisherman's village. So for me, a coastal place where I could access beach, lakes within and forests within relatively easily. So no landlocked state for me was really important. And how? Well, that's what friends are for, and that's where getting know-how and asking people and getting prepared can really help you a lot. So I'm now going to the application step per se. What does that entail? From July, August of whatever year you are until November, December, which is when the deadlines are. So you basically need, essentially, on average, 4 major types of materials that make your application packet: the cover letter, the CV, the research statement, and the teaching statement. Now, I'm putting here on the bottom letters of recommendation because sometimes they are submitted with a packet, sometimes they are not. And then people have been giving a lot of different names to this fifth statement, which is the DEI, EDI service. Like, DEI has been rebranded and reworded in many, many different ways. And I don't think they are asking for these anymore, sadly, but there are ways that you can make them part of your application. And I'm also happy to discuss that later. So I think everyone knows what these are, but in a nutshell, cover letter summarizes your credentials, and it's what's in the application. Should be like a helicopter view of what they will expect from your application, they being the search committee. CV, normal CV, training, honors, publications, teaching, mentoring, experience, talks, service, outreach. Research statements: who you are, what you've done, where are you going. In my experience, they vary. Some ask you for 3 pages, others 5, others 1. So it is important that you have templates for all of these, and you can easily tailor them in ways that they can fit the different sizes. Teaching statement is usually 1 or 2 pages. If it's 2 pages, that's when you can leverage that to use service. If you were able to do acts of service through your teaching or through your outreach, it's an easy way to sneak it in some things that right now have been completely deleted. And of course, what you write in a service statement is pretty much personal, and there's no formula about it. And I'm also able, I can tell you what my own personal experience was with this. And last but not least, please ask your recommendation letters in advance of your deadline. So you want to give them time to and enough detail so they can keep up with your application processes. So for example, in my case, I did the spreadsheets that I mentioned to you before, but I was also poking them with emails and reminding emails and alerts. Some of the application portals do have these things where you can access your portfolio and send them automated emails of reminders. Really make sure that this does not fall through the cracks, because recommendation letters really matter. And then if you're interested, we can also dig into the weights of these different packets, what makes one thing more important than the other in terms of what a search committee will weigh in more than the other. So in the end, the application is all about identity. What are the gaps in the field and what do you specifically bring to address them? What are your dream questions, experiments, and outcomes? And how is that different from your advisors? That is a hard one. Vision. Given 6 years, certain amount of people, and $1 to $2 million, what would you do? If everything you did worked, what would people say about you and about your work? And for me, that is important. I didn't add here, but for me, it was like, not people as just my peers and my seniors, but my mentees and my trainees. That for me is the most important one. And are your general hypotheses and questions higher than yourself and the specifics? So it's, as scientists, and especially when we're working projects, we get so stuck with the details and the manual books of the softwares we're using and the versions and how these work, that we think we really need to know all of that. But the application process is pretty much all about big vision and big picture and advocacy. So you need to sense, or as you read your materials, that the paragraphs, the statements, the sections get your committee hooked. So is your identity and your vision fundable, which are really thought-provoking questions, and I'm also happy to discuss them with you. Are they impactful? Well, we can also discuss that, because what impactful research means comes in many different shapes and sizes. But overall, do you showcase how your past and ongoing research make you uniquely positioned to address the questions that you have? And do you do all of these in an original yet non-overwhelming way? So this is basically my digest of what applications are all about. So revisit these things often, because knowing these will prep you for the interviews. And I'm also going to share all the interview questions that may pop up with everyone. Writing your materials is a full-time job. Don't fool yourselves, thinking that you can do any research and any service and anything other than applying. Your research will suffer a completely huge bottleneck. And this is where you will be struggling with yourself, because you will feel guilty because you're not doing any research, you're not being productive, you're consistently showing up with your advisor with questions about the application and not about the scientific outputs or results that they are expecting to see. So this is why having a conversation with them beforehand helps, so that you give yourself permission to take over this and be kind to yourself with the research not advancing as you would like. Be authentic and original, tailored, but strong. Like, this feels like impossible things to achieve. It seems like a lot, but here are some really good tips that I got from friends. Try to go from broad to narrow or hourglass shape. Find easy ways when you have your templates to sort of swap keywords. So basically you want to have template application packet where you will have highlighted sections where you can switch it by the specific job, the university, and here and there one paragraph that you can tailor to whatever specifics of that application search is asking. make sure your accomplishments are memorable and prominent. This is one of the hardest things to do. You don't want to go we. You need to say I, my research, my program, my lab. You really need to envision yourself as a PI, which you're not, and as a self-centered narcissistic person. And I know no one wants to sound like that, and it's horrible and it's cringy, but it is really hard. For me, it was really hard because science is so collaborative that it's really hard to switch the we to the I. But I think that this is something that we already need to do for qualification exams and for some presentations that we give and interview jobs that we did for postdocs. So, but that is really important that you use active instead of passive, for example. Another thing is that make branding and formatting consistent across materials. So make sure that the font sizes, the styles that you're using throughout your packages are kind of like uniform and consistent. So for example, I always use the same blue or green color for the different materials, and I always use a way of formatting that was make them sound like a whole, a complete thing. Link documents to online presence. So things that you cannot say in these materials, but if you put links to it, people will find. So for example, I did a lot of field work in the Sahara Desert catching foxes. So in my website, I had images of camera trappings and animals and nocturnal things. Um, so if there's any way in your research that you have ways of showing you doing your work in real time, that can be a really good way for them to see who you are beyond the standards and the formulas of these application styles. Find an overreaching story and structure. So a lot of the hard times that people have is balancing big picture with concrete ideas. Both of them need to be present in the application. It's all about big picture, but you also don't want to, but it has to be big picture on some aspects, not of all of them. So it is big picture on average, but then when you go into aims of your research, you cannot say, if you're a geneticist or a genome scientist, I'm just going to sequence all the genomes of all the species in the world, and you need to have concrete step-by-step things, and that is inhabiting a little bit more of the grant mindset. But and so you will write a research statement with a grant and PI pitch mindset, but you won't be as technical when you do your aims and your methods as you would be in a grant. So balancing that. Also balancing your past, your present, and your future. So one of the things that you want to do when you talk about your past and your present is always as justifications for how that makes you uniquely prepared for doing the future work. That is really key. So not so much as, oh, this was my past and then this is my future. You can do that, but you need to write it in a very smart way that shows that your past makes you perfect, qualified, and a great person to address everything that you propose next. And make sure that everything is digestible and easy to get. So write for broader audiences, and please, this is so important, enough white space in your materials, margins, lines. Don't try to squeeze in words into an application. That the more white space there is across your application, the easy will be for a committee to skim through it and to be able to want to read it. So then I'm just going to briefly skim through what each of these things are all about. So the cover letter, basically, it can be broken down into 5 paragraphs. First one, you say, I'm writing to apply for, and you make it adjustable to whatever job you want. And this is a paragraph that has to summarize somewhat your credentials and killer accomplishments. So for example, I said, I'm an evolutionary biologist that addresses pressing fundamental questions in dot, dot, dot. I have these, my key questions have been that. And my exciting discoveries and curiosity has led to successful publications in dot, dot, dot. And if you have those successful publications, and as cringy it is to say, name drop those journals. If there's a Science and Nature, Cell, Genome Research, and Nature Ecology and Evolution, PNAS, don't be shy about that. When you say about where you graduated from, don't be shy about putting UC Berkeley, Cornell, whatever. Use Harvard, use the Ivies. That's just what it is. Then paragraph 2 is summarizing what you have done a little bit as a PhD and as a postdoc. So you can go into the undergrad level if you think it benefits you. So for example, I had an application for a conservation genomics call, and I didn't do much conservation genetics in my PhD and my postdoc was mostly evolutionary genetics and genomics, but I did some conservation work as my undergrad. So I think in that case, pulling up from that undergrad experience was important to the specific job that I was applying. Then you have a paragraph where you briefly state your vision for you and your lab and your research program. Paragraph 4, you want to include a paragraph about teaching and mentor and acts of servicing and things that you are passionate about that distinguishes you from any highly qualified top university institution person, because there will be a lot of people who will share similar strengths and skills from paragraph 1 and to paragraph 3, maybe not paragraph 3, but in paragraph 4, that's you, that's your uniqueness. And lastly, you can have a final paragraph that says something like, not in these words, but that translates that how you will both fit it into the department and the institution, but how you will also bring something new. So they need to understand that at the very end. Now, another debatable thing is whether to include specific names of people with whom you might collaborate in that department. And if you have questions about that, I can also explain why this is a sensitive, debatable topic. So, is there a formula? Well, I would say there is, because I showed you those in those 5 paragraphs. They are pretty standard. And if you ask anyone that share to, like your advisor and postdocs and grad students in your lab that has done this before, you will find that there is a formula that you can squeeze in. But in the end, it's all about, is your opening paragraph honest, strong, and passionate? Do you have strong and sweet sections on why you are a good fit? So past and future. And I actually think it's important and smart to be showing both independent and collaborative research, if you have those, teaching and mentoring wise, funding wise, personality wise. Now, obviously, you're not going to be writing, oh, I'm such a kind and nice person. Like, there's no way you that would pass. So there needs to be, I think, the personalities in the way you write, the way you transmit your messages, the way you think about science, and the way, while you were doing your PhD and your postdoc, you decided to give a little piece of yourself to the craft or to the communities that you engaged with. So will the search committee be jumping off their seats to read the rest of your application? So I had some friends that read my materials and they were like, I would be jumping to hire you. This is so exciting. I can't wait to see what you're looking for. That is the kind of feedback that you want to get. But obviously it took me a while to get there. So there's a lot of backs and forths. And hours and hours and hours, an existential crisis in the process. Is it easy on the eyes? So for me, it is really important because for me, aesthetics and art and creativity is something that I'm very drawn to. So for me, it was really important that there was enough spacing and enough margins. And I think this is something that from the positive feedback I got, people appreciate it. So CV, okay, it's a pretty normal CV. I don't know what to say about these other than there are really these sections need to be there, right? Academic background, awards and grant machines, publications, talks, presentations, posters, teaching and mentoring expertise, professional service. And here by professional service, I mean things like being a reviewer, if you review papers for journals, and any kind of things like, in this case, Sarah hosting the CCV Skills Share, and any kind of like conferences that you helped organize, all these things, and outreach and inclusion that comes as like community service. And in the end, is like, is it inspiring and easy on the eyes? Again, you also don't want the CV to be highly overwhelming. And one thing that I found that is interesting to do in publications is that you kind of find ways to tease apart, so you can put all your name in your publications in bold, and you should find ways to tease apart what is co-first, what is first, what is seniority. If those publications got media coverage, put them there. If they got the cover of the journal, put it there, and use symlinks or hyperlinks to connect to those covers and to those media coverages. Especially, they will love it if the media coverage has been this kind of like popular science things. Obviously, if the New York Times talk about it, go for it, put it. There's a lot of ways to do this. So the research statement, this is something that for me, it's actually probably the most personal of them all, even though that is a bit weird for some people. I really found the research statement to be deeply personal. So I try to find a way, oh, is there a formula? So I basically tried not to, so basically I try to make these as sections, same way in the cover letter style. So you want to have a vision section. So a short, strong, overarching opening section where readers will quickly get you. So who you are, where you're going, and hopefully where you're going in 5 to 6 years. Don't go crazy about, I'm going to be the biggest expert in my field. Like, you need to show yourself as someone that is capable and amazing, obviously, but you also don't want to come across as unself-aware and overwhelming. Contribution section, so you would want to give a summary of your past contributions and accomplishments, and again, how I said this before, all in the section of how all with the intent of showcasing how these inform the big picture. And then the research program. This would be project sections, big modules that look like grant aims and pitches for 3 projects. And you can create subsections or sub aims in these different modules, where you will start always with the same skeleton: motivation, hypotheses, and you may actually try to, if you prefer, instead of doing a contribution section before, you can do a little balance in these modules where you can say, okay, this is what I've done in the past to address this question. Going forward, I will do that, dot, dot, dot. Funding and institutional opportunities. I only advise to put these if they give you 3 to 5 pages to do so. If they only give you 2 pages, this is probably something to put later on for your chalk talks and your job talks. So what you either put these nested to the project sections at the very end, and you can even say this fits into the aim of an NIH grant, NSF grant, whatever. And you can also here be more explicit how you will collaborate with the peers and institutes and leverage the infrastructures you have at that university specifically, or even like all the networking that you did so far, the baggage that you have, because that will enrich the institution. So for example, I try to put here things like this would be a great National Geographic grant for some things that were related with field work, and for things that I think baggage that will enrich the institution. Well, I was able to be part of these consortiums, like the Telomere to Telomere Primate Consortium and the Vertebrate Genome Project Consortium. This is good things to quote unquote name drop, future directions and take them home. So those, again, going forward, can be nested in your subsections. That is also very personal, and sometimes it actually depends on the structure that the application of ad will ask you. Regardless, you just need to be doing at the very end, go back into this hourglass shape where at the end you go a bit more broader and big picture and convey that you are more than the sum of your parts. So you wrote your materials. What do? You leave it to breathe. You ask for feedback and you ask yourself, did you establish yourself as quote unquote an expert or working at the edge of your field? Do you remind readers for key publications so they don't have to go back to your CV? Do you have a few places highlighted that you can swap in keywords for the specific job? Is the writing high level enough, or did you get buried in detail? And is the broad impact of your work evident at the end? Again, after doing that, go back, re-edit, work on your materials, and then breathe, ask for feedback, and then ask yourself once again, do you have visual aid on the first page that someone can see, not read, who you are? Like a scheme, a figure, something that illustrates what your research program is all about. Do you have figures for each modules that make your aims more easy to get and your proposed work to get? So the same way some papers, you need to be able to tell the story of a publication with the figures. And if people would read just the figures and the figures legends, they would get more or less what the paper is all about. This is a little bit the same mindset and rationale. Of course, you need to ask yourself, do your statements convey the way you think about science and how this would build into a lab? Is it clear that you have big picture and that you provide new and important perspectives? Do you have concrete steps? So not just broad, general, do you have really concrete things that show that you actually thought about it more than, yeah, I could sequence some genomes and look at them, for example. And of course, I'm being a bit absurd here, but just to showcase that. And do you present your graduate and student work as evidence to the skill sets that you have to go forward? Then there's the teaching statement, and for this one, there's actually a more straightforward formula. So this is what you need to do when you think about a teaching statement. There's a teaching philosophy section, a teaching experiencing section, a mentoring and teaching goals section, proposed classes that you could teach at the university, and a brief closing. So teaching philosophy is why and how do you want to teach at a university? And that is probably the most personal aspect of it. Then you list the courses you taught, past and present, and how that shaped your philosophy and teaching and mentoring goals. Then you say what are the specific approaches that you would be giving to either on a classroom set or in a mentoring set. So how would you approach mentoring for a postdoc and a PhD student, and how would you approach teaching in these massive classrooms? And then you need to list some of the proposed classes that you would feel like are walk in the parks. And some people just put broadly themes. Some go specific, they search the university coursework and they cherry pick some courses that they could easily teach, and give a little bit of a sneak peek of some advanced courses that only you and you only could teach, because this is what you bring there. So it's basically working with what is and what you could give the grad students and the postdocs that is not available at the moment. And then obviously, brief closing, link all threads of experience to big picture needs. And I think I always try to link these, and I do my teaching statement pretty much big picture for science and society specifically. Then there's the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and equity, diversity, and inclusion are survey statements. And for me, what I would like to say is that there are no formulas and no rules. And if there's a lack of statement, but this is really important to you, you can put it here and there. So there are two things that I think you should discuss in that very personal statement. We all know that STEM has a massive problem. So acknowledging it won't be enough. You want to showcase how your personal experiences shape the way you look at these issues and how you can help advance them. So, how have you, will you handle lack of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion? What activities have you done or will do to advance it? Can you find opportunities in mentoring, teaching, in and outside the classroom? And these are things that you could put on your research, if applicable, are teaching statements. How can, and that's, yeah, that's exactly what I mean after through your research. And also, and I think this is really good, that you think a little bit how you could do this through your own funding and institutional opportunities. So my only advice for the diversity statement, and take it with a grain of salt, is to use concrete examples and actionable measures and draw from your experience. Now, I added this one, which is a bit of a thought-provoking one, which is balanced tone. And this is something that I didn't do in my previous application, but I know a lot of friends who are applying right now have been asked or advised to do. And by balancing tone is, in the current situation that we're living these days, is extremely hard to be talking about, even using these words. And these are things that some universities will really love you for if you care about them. Others will be like, oh, steering some waters, this is not the right time. So I think that if you are gonna go into really your strong takes on Jedi, I think that you should do so in a way that is honest and it's authentic, but also in a way that doesn't sabotage your chances. Because I have friends that have been having a lot of issues with this for this grand cycle, and that everyone has been advising them to tone down the way they talk about these things. Then I just would like to say that before going to the interview and the offer, which is just 10 minutes, because I think the application is really something that requires some more comprehensive discussions, is that you can curate a database and keeping up with job postings through various ways. So for those doing evolutionary ecology and genetics, there's the EcoEvo job listserv and the Evolve Year listserv. So if you do evolution, population genetics, genomics, molecular and cell biology, this could be useful. Social media, word of mouth, some call it networking. So what happens is that if you were giving talks at conferences, sometimes there are chairs for these committees, and they were like, oh, I think this would be really good for our university, you are sort of a great fit, why don't you apply? The same way that would get you a postdoc. You can connect with a PI at a conference and they say, oh, do you want to be my postdoc? So basically, some cases they will say, do you want to apply to our department? And those are terrific. Those are really that never happened to me, but I know of people that this happens. And also, that's why I say, if you haven't by now really try to get talks and posters at conferences. And I hate networking. I'm a socially anxious person. And I got a job not being a networker and the social tycoon. So I just want to say that there's a space for introverts. You just need to become an expressive introvert, which is what I sort of became.
I'm now.
Okay.
So I should have like warned you, but I don't know.
Oh. It was very controversial. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we could just like.
We can end this. Yeah. So if you want to know anything about the interview and the offer letter, I can catch you up later. Yeah, I think that this is a lot. So if you want to know more about the interview or the offer letter or know more about what I've just talked so far, yeah, I'm happy to just Q&A. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we can like post all this online.
Everything will be there. Yeah.
Super great.
Yeah.
Good. I have a question, like how many of your applications were like for specific, or were they all like for specific calls, or like they're looking for a professor, this?
So I had some that were like looking for assistant professors of biology and genomics that work at the interface of evolutionary genetics and evolutionary ecology. I had one that was specifically for conservation genomics. And that was that. Because I only applied to things in California and in the East Coast.
Okay, but you didn't have issues like finding calls that were related to like.
No, because they were all either like broad biology departments or evolutionary ecology and EEV sort of departments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you talk a bit more about how you came up with your like vision sections? Because I guess I feel like as a PhD student, I'm used to just thinking one project in the future, and I may be meant to like an undergrad, like definitely don't have like a whole lab. And how do you start like thinking what your whole lab would be like?
Yeah. So you mean like research wise? Yeah. So when I was doing my PhD, I think I had no idea. And I think I only started doing it after the end of my PhD. So, and that tells with why I chose to do a postdoc. So at the end of my PhD, I realized that there was a lot of open questions and hypotheses that I wanted to pursue. So that was the research program. Right there, I could see exactly where I was going. But I realized that I didn't have the skill sets to do some of the next phase things. So for my postdoc, I joined a postdoc where I would develop that skill set to help me one day revisit the questions that I had in the put to the side, so that one day I would have more knowledge and know how to revisit those questions. Partially, the other part was I was very mature and I didn't feel like I was ready to mentor and financially support people, and I still don't know. That's something no one teaches you. And I think I was very interested in learning about how to mentor students and how to write grants and apply for grants. So that was what the postdoc was for. And so I think slowly through my postdoc, I was able to put the pieces together. And I started seeing at some point there was some momentum where I had a lot of papers coming out. I was giving a lot of talks in conferences. I was building a good support group. I don't like to say network. It's just people who become your friends, and those people who become your friends and colleagues happen to be very smart and interesting and also find similar positions. And when that started becoming whole, I was like, okay, I think I can apply. I have these questions and I have the enough mentoring, training, and experience, and also research know-how on how to do these, and things just start showing up in the horizon, like I think it was during walks and during my hobbies that these things start coming. That's why I also I don't know, I should have mentioned that, but it's really important that you keep doing activities outside the application material that really nourishing you. Maybe over a sunset that will become clear, you know? So those are kind of important things to do that, and while you're sleeping is so important, so hard. Something I failed completely to do during the interview process, but those things mature overnight, so it will come clear. Yeah.
Well, I also have to run
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, so I think I might like stop the recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was